If you don't have feet on the ground, if you're not out there listening, if you're not out there getting to know the people, the market, the talent, how are you building anything? Humor is viral. And the goal was to create a campaign that everybody wanted to send or talk about. Actually, personally did a deal with Bill Gates and we created Expedia. And so I put a team together. We designed the first, we got some patents. So we created the first kiosks for check-in.
Yeah.
So it's when you recognize that a team of people smarter than you is your real job. Go build that team and get out of the way. That's when you scale.
Welcome to Venture Ahead. It's a series of podcasts recorded by IE University. These were recorded in Porto Alegre in Brazil at the 4th edition of the South Summit. We got to speak to people who had done keynotes, former IE students. We got to speak to people who were on panels, people that we just met and found interesting. Do this at each of the South Summit because it's a great opportunity to talk to some of the people. So thank you for getting this far. Listen to the end and let us know what you think. Hi there, this is Joe Haslam, professor at IE Business School, and we're here in Porto Alegre in Brazil. And, you know, there's this thing about, like, never meet your heroes and never kind of, and when you meet them, don't embarrass yourself here. But I'm here with Jeff Hoffman, who, I, as someone who's written a book on how to scale companies, I've started travel companies, I'm now involved very much in education and entrepreneurial organizations. So, you're sort of like being a pioneer and a trailblazer. And it's something that you've talked about in the past, that you should always have someone that you're looking up to.
Yes.
As an example. So let me just start always that you here for a keynote. So what was in your keynote and what's sort of the message that you're giving people at the moment?
Yeah, so the keynote here at South Summit is about innovation and creativity, but it's this. Joe, years ago, I started looking at my business heroes, the world's most innovative or successful people and companies, and I had this question: what are they doing that I'm not? What are the most innovative creators doing that everybody else isn't? And it turns out there is something. So for like 20 years, I've been observing, studying every time I've had a chance to be around them, asking a lot of questions. And what I put together was a talk on the habits, the tools and techniques of the world's most creative people. What can you do to emulate what they do to have their level of success innovating and creating new ideas? That's my South Summit keynote.
Sure. Okay. I mean, James Clear's book Atomic Habits has done very well,
Yes.
and he spoke a lot about, and then, which is unusual because he wasn't a person who was known. Usually you have to be like a celebrity to write a book. But if the book is really good, then you sort of become the celebrity afterwards. And, he talks about the compounding version of habits and how they can all lead. But what's very true is to say that, if you think how education has changed, now that the information is widely available to people, the new skills are asking questions,
Absolutely.
And it's something we can't say enough.
And it's when you have that moment, that opportunity to be around somebody you can learn from, you have to be prepared with the right set of questions.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, people ask me, what happened to the business plan? And the business plan, which we all used to write, died for a lot of people because they mistakenly thought it was a place to write down all the answers, which is silly because in a startup, you don't know any of the answers. But what it really was, and I think part of the reason that some of our ventures were successful, is because we used it as a place to write down all the questions that if we knew the answers to, our business would really work. So I used to say, what list of questions do I wish I could answer about travelers, about travel trends, about the industry? All those questions, and one by one, because we were searching for the answers, we found them, which I think enabled us to provide a better product.
Yeah, it's interesting. We I know you're a big boxing fan.
Yeah.
Tyson is quoted with like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And I think a business plan is anything other than that, anything other than an initial statement. What I think it was Patton or somebody or some German general who said like plans are useless, but planning is important.
I completely agree because it takes you through that mental process of laying all that out and making that list. And by the way, if you don't know what the questions are, you're certainly not going to be searching for the answers.
Yeah.
Right. One day I was talking to my team and I said, on the board is a list of things I wish I knew the answer to. And one of the people in the room said, you never told me you were looking for that. And I said, why does that matter? He said, because I'm the database designer. He said, now that I know what you think you want later, I'm going to redesign the infrastructure of our company so that we could actually acquire that info. If I hadn't mentioned that way ahead, we would have never seen that data because I didn't know how to get it.
Yeah, this thing about asking questions, I can't emphasize it enough that most of my classes now, we don't teach cases. Instead, what we do is we bring speakers like you, and I'm like, listen, the world only meets you halfway. So here's my job. I'm going to bring this person into the room. It's going to be an AMA, ask me
Yep.
anything. And if the class goes well, it's down to you asking questions, which is to say, I mean, an example would be tell us all about the William Shatner thing, because that's like one of the most legendary stories of the travel business.
It's interesting because early on, so at Priceline, there wasn't an ad agency. The copy was written in-house, right? We were writing our own copy for commercials, actually creating those commercials early on with Shatner. But the concept was that you need to create messaging that goes viral. And one of the most viral things is humor. You and I will send something to all our friends because it's funny, not because it made us sad and ruined our day.
Hmm.
So humor is viral. And the goal was to create a campaign that everybody wanted to send and or talk about. Did you see William Shatner? By the way, the original commercials were him singing.
Okay.
And the whole reason for that was there was this internet survey. They asked people to name the worst album in recorded music history. And the overwhelming choice was William Shatner Sings Christmas.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was part of the seed of the idea. Let's have Shatner singing because he's so bad on a commercial, and that will get everybody talking. And it was interesting because later we'd release a new commercial and travel sales would go up. And people would say like, wow, those guys are brilliant. And back in the office, we're like, wow, I wonder why that worked, right? You look brilliant if it works later, even if it wasn't brilliant. But the underlying concept was he delivers our cheesy sense of humor. And the idea of having him sing poorly, we knew would get people talking. And they'd say, what's that commercial for? And ultimately they'd say, oh, it's this new company called Priceline. It worked.
Yeah, no, legendary, and even Family Guy, they sort of parody it with Stewie singing like in the Shatner way, which is I'm terrible. YouTube has me totally addicted for like watching like old fights or stuff on Family Guy that I shouldn't be doing.
A couple of the writers of Family Guy are friends of mine.
Oh, really?
So I was
Oh, wow.
recently out there at the studio,
Yeah.
and I was jealous. I would trade it all if I could sit in the room and write with them. Actually, to be fair, they told me write some cutaways, and we'll try to get them in the show.
Oh,
So I have a new challenge in my career: get something I wrote onto Family Guy because my friends are the right.
But of course, it turned out to be a lucrative thing for him. People all talk about Michael Jordan and Air and having equity and how he turned him into a millionaire. But Shatner had a very clever deal as well.
So we were actually, at least recognized as the first startup to do a celebrity for equity. And Shatner used to complain about one of his jokes one day. Was calling the office and to say, it's really what he said. He said, I'm on the toilet and I'm out of Priceline stock. Can you guys send me some more? And everybody's laughing and he's saying, I should have taken cash. Yeah. And then in the end, obviously the multiples of what he would have been paid, which would have been hundreds of thousands, and that equity was worth tens of millions of dollars. And he hadn't really made money before that. So taking a gamble, by the way, if you remember, after that, every celebrity in Hollywood was calling an internet company. But we actually sort of started that trend back then.
Yeah, it literally became a crypto thing, right? Every celebrity was kind of in that. So one of the things we're interested, obviously, South Summit, we're from IE University in Madrid. And it's sort of interesting that the whole booking.com thing, so finding this company in the Netherlands, and I mean, look, Booking was responsible for most of the growth of. So talk to me about like identifying them and how important a role they played in success.
Early on, everybody was talking about the competitive part, right? I actually personally, before, so Priceline, the idea and the IP for Priceline was a gentleman named Jay Walker, an inventor. And Jay had been calling me monthly saying we need to put a team together to go build this thing. But before that, I actually personally did a deal with Bill Gates and we created Expedia. So I was in this space working. So the question was competition. How does a Priceline, right? And then I left and joined that team and we built Priceline. But how do you stay competitive? Well, that was a U.S. question. All these online travel agencies were being birthed in the U.S. Meanwhile, in our Friday executive meetings, strategically, we were saying, well, everyone's battling it out in the U.S. Let's go conquer Europe and Asia. And so the question was, how do you get a head start there instead of starting from scratch? So that's where the search criteria, who has a business set up, who has started the technology, started to create a brand, the marketing, looking for a company that had a head start on the online travel business that already existed in Europe, which was booking.com, and in Asia, which was agoda.com. So the company's like, if we acquire those two businesses, we'll be much farther ahead than starting in scratch, and that strategy worked.
How did you find working with the?
Yeah, so for me, I had by the way, way before that, my first product in travel was creating when you go to the airport and you check in on a check-in kiosk, my first company in travel, those didn't exist. You had to check in with a human. And so I put a team together. We designed we got some patents. So we created the first kiosks for check-in. But my first customer, the first phone call I got was Schiphol and
Okay.
KLM, which explains why that airport's usually one of the top rated in the world, because they're like, hey, that's cool. People can check themselves in a kiosk. So I had been working with the Dutch in the travel space for years and had a very good experience. In fact, I set up my European office in Amsterdam, which turned out to be economically bad because it's too expensive. But the Dutch were great business partners earlier for me, so I already felt comfortable.
So in terms of like scale ups in Europe, like you have ASML, you have Adyen, and you have Booking. So the Dutch yeah, they can do their scale ups.
They most certainly can. Yeah, they study the business models, they study the best practices to the point you and I just made. They ask a lot of questions, so
Yeah,
it's not surprising.
they're not afraid of asking
Yep.
a direct question. Now, of course, you have written a book called Scale, which is an easy title to remember. So, what I mean, there's this big thing about anyone can start, but the real job is scaling.
Scale, yeah.
Okay, so just talk to me about like why some founders fail to make the transition from being great starters to not being good scalers.
Sure, I will tell you the first and biggest one, and now this is not something I knew then. This is something I've learned later, right after what we did with Priceline Booking. Then I did another one called ubid.com that we also it became the fifth largest auction site. And then I've been through this a few times, this scale process. So now it's looking back and reverse engineering. What did we do that made it work? And I will tell you the first one is that its founders make it too much about themselves. You know what they tell me? Jeff, I'm working harder and longer than ever before. Why am I not scaling? And the answer, that's the problem. The answer is you're in the way. For me personally, as a leader and a CEO, my success started when I realized instead of spending this much time trying to build the business myself, I need to spend more time hunting for rock stars and building teams of people smarter than me and just serving them so they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
So it's when you recognize that a team of people smarter than you is your real job. Go build that team and get out of the way. That's when you scale. Most founders don't get that. They keep telling me I'm working even longer. And I'm like, you're the inefficiency. Everything has to go through you. You'll never scale until you can trust and empower people smarter than you.
Yeah, the research into soccer or football is that very much just if you can get your hands on the best players, you'll win.
Yeah,
There isn't much,
imagine
there
that.
isn't much more beyond that, and they're just if you get your hands on the best player, and then obviously create an environment around them that allows them to do their
And they
job.
still don't win on their own.
Yeah.
Right? Shaquille O'Neal's a friend of mine.
All right.
And we had this conversation recently because everybody loves Kobe Bryant. But Shaq's question that we'll never know the answer to is Kobe was not and would not win by himself. Kobe couldn't win until we had the right team around him.
Going back to just the scaling question, I mean, one of the things that I've seen go wrong, the theory of that is perfectly fine. So you find like whoever brought Uber from like whatever 550 to
Right.
1,000, right? But unfortunately, I have seen people go in who did that and being unable to repeat the trick, and perhaps it is maybe that there are other factors that kind of they had momentum, something
Sure.
like Uber when they were in a certain phase, you couldn't miss, because people wanted this thing, so that's always. So how do you judge? I mean, do you do many interviews? I guess, do people like for senior hire? I know a lot of people in your situation, they're often called in as like an actual devil's advocate, which is to say, we think he's a good guy, but would you just meet with Jeff and just get Jeff's kind of, okay, I didn't see any red flags. So what kind of things, if you're interviewing or trying to judge whether something is a go or a no-go?
So that's a great question. And yes, I do that for a lot of companies. They advise or boards I'm on. They run these big decisions by me. The biggest one for me has nothing to do with your resume, your CV, your skill set, your background. It's 100% cultural. because we've seen some amazing performers that when they brought them into the company, they had a cultural problem and they didn't fit. So what I've learned over time is to develop a set, back to what you and I talked about, what questions do you ask? A set of questions to determine if you have a cultural fit. And that's about making sure that you have shared values. I made this mistake once in one of my companies. I basically brought somebody in and made him a co-founder. I could have hired him in hindsight, made him a co-founder. And where I realized I didn't ask enough cultural questions is we had a problem with an employee. And the way I wanted to counsel and work with and basically upskill this employee was the plan. And what he wanted to do was harsh and I thought inhuman.
Chop them and,
Yeah,
throw 'em,
get
kick
rid of
'em
him.
out.
One
Yeah.
time he said to an employee, she had a big problem at home and she came back after lunch and she was at her desk crying.
Yeah.
And I said, why is nobody over there? What's wrong?
Yeah.
And I started walking over there, and you know what he said to me? We don't pay people to cry. That's why I didn't go over there. And I was like, I need a divorce from this partner now.
Yeah.
I didn't assess the cultural fit. And by the way, the rock star employees out there, they care a lot about the culture of your company. What are the values of this company? What do we stand for? What do we believe in? A lot of the best people that I got to work for me told me later, it was more than a job. It was a culture that I was attracted to. Those are the questions that I asked.
The one I always tell people is at the end of an interview, if you say, and do you have any questions? And if they say no, that is like
bad,
the reddest, the whatever, give me the hex number for like the deepest red you can possibly find. Like that is like, oh my God, like that is like just absolutely terrible.
I completely agree.
No.
You need to be really interested in this company, or why would we waste this opportunity on you?
The other one I like to say, here's me giving Jeff Hoffman business advice. Like, this is probably with being Irish. Like, no, we don't know our place in the world. But there is a thing about, like, how will I be evaluated is another important question, Because if you're a good employee, you should want to be evaluated.
Yes.
And you should want all of those things. And you shouldn't want, so that's another kind of a straight question.
You know what that one reminds me of? Which I tell CEOs and leaders this all the time. The compensation between cash, paycheck, and equity, whether it's bonus or rev share or whether it's just straight equity.
Yeah.
Rock stars know they are going to perform and they want a piece of the action. They don't want to make your company valuable and you sell it and you succeed and they were part of the reason and they didn't share in that. So people that are focused on cash more than equity, already a red flag for me. The people that know that my contribution to your company is going to make it value and I want a piece of that, my family should benefit from my success, they're already pushing me for equity. And people that aren't, I'm like, why are you not asking me for more equity? Do you not believe the company's going to succeed, or do you not believe you're going to be the reason? If you don't bring that up, I'm concerned. By the way, Tony Shea was a friend of mine. His company was Zappos.
Yeah.
Tony sat at a desk in the middle of all the people. He didn't even have a CEO office. He just sat out there with the people, so the founder was always present and always involved. I love the fact that he did that.
Yeah.
First time I visited him, I said, where's your office? He said, I don't have an office, but I have a desk. I said, there's 3 desks there. He said, mine's the middle one.
Yeah.
He wanted to be present at all times. Obviously, Elon is still in his companies and Bezos for all those years. But I agree with that. I had a funny South Summit example, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Because I believe in that founder commitment, that top-down inspiration and attitude and passion. And the founder starts there and creates that feeling. So, never met Maria, the founder of South Summit. Yesterday, I went to host this leaders forum.
Okay.
I walked into the room, and there were a lot of people standing around sipping cocktails. And there was an employee, some woman that was physically picking up all the chairs and rearranging them.
Yeah.
So I stood there for a minute, and they said, are you looking for someone? I said, I'm waiting to meet Maria, the founder of this whole thing. And they said, that's her moving all the chairs. I said, I already love this woman. She's the founder. She's the only one put her cocktail down and was picking up chairs and moving them. That's what the founder presence does. It creates a ripple effect of attitude and energy. So I do agree with that.
Yeah, and you'll get a text from her at the end thanking you for coming.
That's pretty awesome.
All of those things as well. So Yeah, no, it's been So I always tell people, I walk into a lot of companies and saying, listen, here's the companies I've started. I'm on TV and whatever. I got books and things like that, because they kind of look at you as if you were successful, you wouldn't be here. And I sort of say, like, it all begins from talking to you guys. You don't believe me right
I am
now.
so glad you are saying this, Joe, because
Yeah,
you know what I get a lot of times?
yeah,
Why are you here?
yeah,
And I was like, well, isn't that an interesting question?
yeah.
Right? When people say, why are you here? As though there's some reason that you shouldn't be. By the way, I speak at schools and universities all over the world because that's my favorite thing to do. A lot of times when I go to a country, I may be speaking at an event like South Summit, but I call them and say, can you set me up some schools to visit? I love talking to students. But I've had that same question. Recently, I stopped by the Hospitality and Tourism Management School at FIU, which is in Florida.
Okay.
And that's what the students asked.
Yeah.
It was one class, and I went in the class, and they were like, why would you spend your time coming to our one class? You nailed it, because that is where it all starts. If you don't have feet on the ground, if you're not out there listening, if you're not out there getting to know the people, the market, the talent, how are you building anything? I love doing that. When people say, why don't you just retire and golf? And I tell them, because I don't learn anything sitting home at my couch. I learn something standing in your classroom. I learned something wandering around the exhibit halls of South Summit. You have to be there, and you have to be engaged to keep growing.
I have, like, a lot of parents call me from their classes because someone has sort of said to them, "Oh, you're my son or daughter loves you,"
Yeah.
and that kind of thing, and they talk about, like, how. How they want to be a better father or something like that. And that's another thing about teaching young people. You have to, if you have to get relevant to 18-year-olds, you have to really understand
It's hard.
what their lives are like. So I think it makes me, you'd have to ask my kids to see what they say. But I think it kind of makes me a better father as well, kind of. And you can also see the university environment and what might work for them. And something that's happening, which goes back to your connection to hospitality, is that I am seeing now, and I just actually invested in a company of a former student of mine, because she went to a hotel management school in
Okay.
Switzerland. And you have Cornell in
Yeah.
Switzerland and La Roche, and these are, like, people will say, I want to go. I know you went to Yale. I think, like, people want to say I went to Yale or whatever, and it sounds great, except actually in Spanish, because of the way people say
Yeah,
it.
it's right.
Yeah, have you heard this?
Yeah.
Like, they're like, oh, this is Jeff. He went to jail.
Yeah.
And people are thinking, oh my God,
I've had that happen.
did he kill someone? But I just want to get your thought about this, because I recommend. I have a daughter, and I'm trying to push her towards the hotel management school, and her mother is kind of like much more kind of like, I want her to go to like a top school or whatever. And I'm like, understanding the customer, like what you learn in hotel management, is a fantastic training.
It's much more applicable knowledge. I think that's the difference. But I think the bigger thing is, a lot of times people go to liberal arts school because they have no idea what they want to do,
Yeah.
and they're trying to find something. If you already have a field like tourism or hotel management that you're interested in, you should go to it.
Yeah.
So I agree. The whole point of the college experience is figuring out what you want to do. And so when people know what they want to do, they should pursue that.
Okay, so we're in the last minute of this, and I always ask people at the end, and you can't recommend any of the books you've written, any of the documentaries you've done, any of the films you've produced. You can't talk your own book, okay? But is there anything that you would like to recommend, like a book or a documentary, or something that you found to be that more people should know about?
I don't know if there's stuff that they don't already know about, but here's why I'm saying that. I tend to step away. By the way, my publisher hates me saying this. I tend to intentionally step out of business every once in a while. Like right now, I'm reading fiction. The book that I'm reading on purpose.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I need to refresh my brain, get away from my problems, get away from business, and get some of the right side of my brain engaged, so I'm not always in business mode. So this is just me personally. I'm not telling people to do that. I don't read business books 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
I intentionally go to a concert. I go to the movie theater. I pick up a book. The one I'm reading now is Dean Koontz. I don't know if you know that author, but
Yeah.
it's a thriller. I do that because I want both sides of my brain engaged, and I don't want to be. A lot of times when you step away from a business problem and come back, you have a refreshed view, and you say, well, how did I not see that before? The answer is you were buried so deep in the forest you couldn't see the trees. So for me, I get my inspirations, for example, The Alchemist
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
book I've read more than one time because it makes me think at a deeper level, not what I'm doing in this company, but why am I even doing this?
Yeah. So, Jeff, just thank you so much. I
Thank
believe
you
it's
for
important
having
to
me
thank
today.
people. It's been wonderful to give your time and keep doing what you're doing, and keep it being relevant, and hopefully I can be you when I grow up.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me today.
This is Professor Joe Haslam again, just signing off to thank you for listening to the podcast. They're available on Amazon, they're available on Spotify, they're available on Apple, and they're available on iVoox. Please talk to your friends about them. Tell us what you liked and recommend them. We want to get these ideas spread, and they're a very important part of the community we're trying to build here at IE University. So thank you for listening to Venture Ahead.